In the late 1700s, James Carson and his wife, a Miss Smith, lived in County Antrim near Belfast in what we would today consider Northern Ireland. There, they raised at least 7 children that are known. We know very little about James or his wife, but we do know that one of their children, William Carson, immigrated to America in 1812 and settled in Charlotte, North Carolina. It seems that William quickly adapted to his new country and started developing a pre-Civil War cotton speculation business, a business that over the course of his lifetime would make him quite wealthy. No doubt, William wrote back to his family in Ireland telling them about this new land of wealth and opportunity, and most likely encouraging his siblings to consider coming to America as well. Why do we know this? Because in 1819, William's brother Matthew and Matthew's wife Jane arrived in the new country. Accompanying them were brothers John, Andrew, and Smith Carson, along with their sister Jenny. We don't know much about Matthew's journey to America, other than it was long and arduous and took over 6 months. We're not even sure about what port they landed in upon arriving in the New World. But we do know that during the long, dark voyage, Jane Carson, Matthew's wife, gave birth to a healthy baby boy, who was named John H. Carson. We suspect that the Carson siblings reunited with their brother William in Charlotte. Soon, however, Matthew and Jane Carson, along with their newborn son John H., relocated to Ashe County, North Carolina, where Matthew had purchased land. In Ashe County, near what is now known as Carson Woods, Matthew built a 3-room house. The house had 2 large rooms downstairs with a rock chimney in the center and a fireplace on each end, and 1 large room upstairs with a ceiling made from big, wide boards, likely milled on Matthew's property. In this house, Matthew and Jane would raise John H., along with 5 more children who were all born in America. These children included 1 daughter, Ellen Carson, and 4 sons, William B., James Matthew, Smith Monroe, and Robert. Matthew and his sons became industrious and prosperous Ashe County farmers with over 3,000 acres of property. In addition, Matthew ran the Carsonville Post Office, probably in his home, from October 1823 till June 1837. Interestingly, 2 of Matthew's sons, John H. and William, would also run post offices, John H. in Crumpler and Will in Algiers from 1892 to 1914. Along with many different Ashe County business interests, both John H. and William ran stores in Jefferson, while brother Smith would one day own a copper mine. The Carson family seems to have been particularly involved in politics and public service. John H. and William were both appointed and commissioned as justices on August 1, 1865, at the first session of the county court after the Civil War. In this same year, their father, Matthew Carson, who was now 70 years old, was appointed as the first county commissioner for Ashe County and was charged with administering the amnesty oaths and swearing in of justices of the peace. There were 40 of them. On August 7, 1865, Matthew was also elected to the special 3-man courts, along with David Worth and George H. Hamilton. More importantly, however, during this same year, Matthew was also elected to the North Carolina General Assembly in Raleigh, where he would serve 2 terms. Matthew's grandson, John M. Carson, would serve as Ashe County Sheriff from 1860 to 1868, during one of Ashe County's most tumultuous time periods, that being the Civil War era. In 1872, John H. Carson was elected to the Board of County Commissioners, and in 1874, his brother William, who was already serving as a magistrate, was appointed to a special commission to come up with a workable plan to meet the problem of the uniform listing of taxes in Ashe County. Over the course of the 1800s, it seems that the Carson family, through hard work and ingenuity, quickly adapted to their new life in a new country and rapidly rose up from very humble beginnings. Both Matthew and his descendants also showed their willingness to help their fellow Ashe County residents by serving in any office they were elected to.
Well, we have come into Carson Woods here and marked the original home place of Matthew and Jane Carson that come from Ireland and settled in America. This was a lost place. We come in and cleaned it up and preserved it for the future generations, that it will always be remembered. This is where we got our start. They chose this location due to the valley here, to where it was sheltered from high winds. You had two creeks joining each other, so they built in between those two creeks with water source. Years ago, my grandfather and us used to walk in here, and he had showed me, and I've always had it in my mind, and knew the area, and the remains of the chimney give me the mark of the home place. And so that's what inspired me to go forward with all this. Yeah. When I was somewhere around 12, 13, I can remember corners of the house still standing. And that's why I was able to locate it in where the chimney was and where it fell, and it gave me the markings. But I can remember parts of the cabin when I was a young man.
What did you think when you saw it for the first time? Did it mean as much to you then as it does now?
Yes, it means more today, than it did there. I was just a child, but I was always interested in my history.
First time I ever come here, it was about 5 years ago. Rick brought me here to show me where it's at, and you could not walk in here hardly. You had to push the brush aside and kick the brush off the foundation rocks, and if you hadn't known where it was, you wouldn't have found it. Rick has worked so hard the last 3 years cleaning this up. He's weed eated, he's brought in the chainsaw, and he has worked himself about to death doing it. I mean, he has really worked hard. Cleaned out around the roads, cleaned out this spot. I mean, it's so different. I've got a picture 2 years ago. He was starting to clean it up good in here then, and you wouldn't recognize today. It's so different. And I'm thankful to him for doing it. It just means a lot to me. Our family history needs to be preserved so we don't forget where we come from. It's a good history. Real good history. And he left us a legacy to go by.
Good morning. I'm Joe Carson. I'm one of the many descendants of Matthew and Jane Carson. We stand here in the footprint of the cabin they built over 200 years ago, standing beside a monument erected out of the stones that used to be their chimney. We are pleased and proud to be here to dedicate this monument to their legacy. We celebrate that this place won't be lost. Some of you have grown up around here knowing that there was something of this place but didn't know where it was. Well, 7 generations from now, there will be this monument to let folks know where the Carsons got started in this part of the world.
Okay, I'd like to just give you a little background of the Matthew Carson family. And I've learned this from library research, when I've looked online and at the what family members has told me. Okay, in the late 1700s in Antrim, Ireland, our great-great-great-grandfather, James Carson, and his wife, Miss Smith, had at least 7 children that we know of. In 1812, their son, William Carson, came to America and settled in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I tell you, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I've always had an interest in history, especially local history, and I'd heard of this place. I'd never been down here. I found out probably as a crow flies, I've got property within less than a mile, but 10 miles or so by road at least. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Ashe County at the time that he was commissioner and what he did. Ashe County itself was formed in 1799, At that point in time, they were much bigger than it is now. It involved Avery County, Wilkes County, Allegheny County, some of Watauga, large area. But it was reformed in 1859 before Mr. Carson became a commissioner to its present size as to what it is today. At the time he was commissioner, our population, I went back and looked, was 8,764 people, 8,764. Right now we've got 27,400. It's tripled in size. And we are what we are today due to people like him. And I think about, I'm a commissioner, been there 11 years. I think about them and what he did and his job in Raleigh, the distance, days on a horse or a wagon or whatever. Today you can get there in 3 hours. It's amazing. But I appreciate the opportunity, and it's good to be here, and it's good to see this place that I've heard a lot about.
If you are, in one way or another, a descendant of these folks, I'd like you to join me for the dedication, standing around this. All right. Folks, let's pray. God, we marvel at the things you have done. We marvel at the people through whom you have worked. This day we are especially grateful for your servants, Matthew and Jane. We dedicate this memorial, this monument to their memory in appreciation of the things that they accomplished, of the legacy they have left, and of the mark they have made with their lives. May we who bear their blood make similar contributions, be useful citizens and servants. We pray in the name of Christ. And all of God's people said together, Amen.
Okay, this is my son Thomas. He's the 6th generation from Matthew, counting Matthew. These are my grandsons, Eli and Gideon. Turn around. And they are the 7th generation of Carsonses in the United States from Ireland. And also Carl Carson, he couldn't be here. He's 91 years old, but he would love to be in here, but he couldn't make it. Everybody knows how hard Rick has worked down here. So I have made him this plaque, and everybody about it that's here has signed it today. There's 1 or 2. In grateful appreciation to Richard A. Carson for your hard work and dedication in the mowing and upkeep of the Carson Family cemeteries and home places in the Carson Woods in Ashe County, North Carolina, presented this day, June 12, 2021, by the Carson Family.
Thank you very much.
Well, folks, the rain has held off. We'll say thank you, Lord, and that we all get out of here safely and sometime before dark, right? Thank you for being part of this ceremony. Thank you, Rick, for significantly making it possible. We'll say thank you, God, and go in peace.
We're above the house where Matthew and Jane Carson are buried, and the house is probably less than 100 yards from here. There is a Mr. Roop. There's a set of twins here, unknown, and we got a couple other unknown markers here. So there's about 6 or 7 graves here. Yeah, these 2 markers right here are a set of twins that we were told, that my grandfather told me about, that they had, and I think they lost them at birth. And the twins run in the family. I'm a twin, Colleen's a twin, Carl Carson, he's 91 years old, he's got a twin.
This is the James M. Carson Cemetery, and this is James Carson's tombstone and grave. It has his wife Mary.
Yep, this cemetery hadn't been kept up in many years. I had a couple cousins that come along with me and helped me clean a bunch of it. But we brought it back to life, cleaned the markers, and so we got it to where it needs to be.
This is the James Matthew Carson house in the Carson Woods, and he was the son of Matthew Carson, and him and his wife and 3 children lived here. It was built, I think, sometime around or during the Civil War, as best I know, and it's built 4 brick thick, and so I guess bullets and stuff couldn't go through it. And I'd heard that they had fought here with the Home Guard. I don't know for sure, but I heard that, and it's just amazing that it stood this long. It's fallen in, but it's still standing. Okay, today we're at the Scott Bevan Cemetery, and we have Carson family members buried here. My great-great-grandfather, Smith Carson, and his wife, Polly Caroline Carson, is buried here, along with their son, William. and my grandmother, Gracie Carson Blevins, is buried here, and we're going to visit their grave today. Okay, this is the grave of Smith Carson, my great-great-grandfather, and he's Matthew Carson's son. He was the first lieutenant in the North Carolina 97th Militia during the Civil War in the Confederate side. And he also owned a copper mine in Nathan's Creek in 1890. And him and his wife Polly had 6 children. One of them was Bob Carson, which was my great-grandfather. This is the grave of William Matthew Carson, the son of Polly Caroline and Smith Carson. And he died when he was 24 years old. I don't know what he died of, but he died young. This is the grave of Polly Caroline Carson, the wife of Smith Carson, and she's buried on this side of the cemetery, and Smith and his son is buried over there, and we don't know why, just a mystery. And they had 6 children, and 3 girls and 3 boys. One died at infancy, and William, he died when he's 24. Polly is also my aunt, great aunt, on my dad's side of the family, so I'm my own cousin. Okay, this is the grave of my grandma, Gracie Carson Blevins, and her husband, Upton Blevins. Granny is the 7th child of Bob and Ollie Carson, and when they got married, Granddad was her school teacher, and he lined them all up one day, all the kids, and had them come around and asked them a question. And he got to her, he asked her to marry him. And they said Granddad Bob was about to kill Granddad up, but they let him get married anyway. And they had 1 child, which is my mom, Upton, Eve Rice Blevins. And Granny was born exactly 25 years to the day that Granddad Matthew died.
The next cemetery that we'll be going to is a primitive Baptist church known as the Center, there in Nathan's Creek. We'll be visiting James Robert and his wife Ollie, and Bob Carson, as we know, that's what we know him as, is the son of Smith Carson, and that will get us caught up to present.
Okay, this is the grave of Bob and Ollie Carson, our great-grandfather and grandmother, and they had 10 children, one which was my grandmother, Gracie Blevins, and Carl Carson will be telling you more about him, but I think he was a smith, and I'm sure he farmed, and they lived over, I think, on Huckleberry. Okay, Bob was Matthew's grandson, Smith's boy. This is Carl Carson Sr. This is Carl's father. He was in World War I, and he was the oldest son of Bob and Ollie Carson.
My full name is Carl Carson, Jr., and I was born in West Grove, Pennsylvania, 1930. Well, my mother and father separated when I was 2 years old in 1932, and I have a twin brother. And my maternal grandparents took my twin brother to raise, and my dad's grandparents, Bob and Ollie Carson, took me in to live with them and raise me. They were settlers in Ashe County, lived on Huckleberry Ridge Road. My earliest memories is about 1935, I guess, or 36. And it was just a common grow up, I guess, and for that time of the century. Home place was a 3-bedroom log house. It has been torn down since they passed away. And my room was up in the attic, cold in the wintertime. I slept on a feather tick in the wintertime, and a straw tick in the summertime. Well, it was a pretty standard farm for the time, similar to what everybody had in that area. We had milk cows, and had a team of horses. That was the mechanical power of the time, horsepower. And my granddad was a miller. He had a grist mill, ground cornmeal for people in the vicinity. Used to grind meal. I think it was on Tuesdays and Fridays. I think 2 days a week, people would bring their cornmeal in, and he was also a blacksmith. He did a lot of fusing, not welding, but fusing of the time, repair broken equipment for people, and it was a typical farm. I think there was 80 acres of it, mostly hill, of course. It's a little bit of bottom land around the house, but other than that, it was all hillside.
How was the mill powered? By a stream or by an engine?
It was powered by a 5-horsepower economy hit-and-miss engine. The old mill house fell down in the early 50s. Granddad bought the engine about 1914, and he used it up until, I suppose, the late 40s. And it's possibly into the early 50s, but at any rate, the old mill fell down, and my Uncle Fay took the engine to his house and set it out in the middle of the field. It sat there for, I guess, until about 1988 or 89. No, 1978 or 79. And I seen it one day and asked him what he wanted for it, and he says, "It's yours." So my brother, Ray, and I hauled it to Atlanta, where I was living at the time, and I rebuilt it and got it running. And currently it's on display at the Regional Museum here in Mount Airy.
Tell me about your responsibilities growing up on the farm. Did you have chores you were expected to do, and what were those chores?
I did exactly what they told me to do.
What would have happened if you didn't?
I don't know. I never got a whipping. May have had one spanking, but my granddad and grandmother were very quiet folk. They didn't speak a lot, but when they spoke, you took it that you knew what they meant, and you did it. I did it, and it was a good life. You know, I came home. I walked a mile to school, and believe me, it was uphill both ways. That's a fact. And when I got home from school, I pulled off my shoes and changed them into my old pair of overalls, and went to work. Oh, hoe corn, put up hay. Putting up hay in those days was a make work effort. You mowed the hay, then you raked the hay into windrows, then you took a couple of days later you would put the windrows into what they call shocks. Then you would use what was called hay poles, 2 hay poles, and you would carry that hay to a central location, and you would stack it around a hay pole. Stack it into, everybody knows what a haystack looks like. I can't think of a more make work procedure than was putting up hay.
Did you like working on the farm, or did you hate it?
I liked it. I probably at times had rather gone fishing, but I liked it.
What did you do for, when you had some time off, what did you do for leisure, and who were your friends? Did you have any friends close by?
I had 2 first cousins. They were 2 or 3 years older than me, Frank and Sam Carson. They were the sons of Art Carson, my father's brother. And we ran around together quite a bit. But then during the school year, we would go spend a night with each other, 2 or 3 times in a year, probably with a friend, and would reciprocate, and they'd come and spend a night with me. As for recreation, we made our recreation. We didn't have toys. I had a pocket knife, and we would build a flutter mill out in the creek. Find a piece of pipe, we'd dam up the creek and make what was called a flutter mill. I had a rim off of an old wagon tire, and I would make a T out of a couple of pieces of wood, and I would roll that rim everywhere I went. I used to roll it all the way to 221 when I'd go to school, hide it, pick it up, and roll it back home. I guess work was a fun time, really. We'd play ball. If we didn't have a ball, but we'd get a couple of old socks, and we would unwind those socks and make a ball out of the thread, and we'd bat that around. That was fun.
Tell me what was a flutter mill?
Flutter
I've never
mill.
heard that.
A flutter mill was just 2 pieces of wood crossed like this with a nail in each side, and then it was on a fork, and the water would come down through a pipe and turn that water wheel. Actually, I suppose a water wheel would be more appropriate.
Tell me where you went to school, and then tell me about what was school like back then, because it's changed dramatically.
It has changed. Nathan's Creek was I don't know what they call it, but it was included the 1st grade through 12th grade. And each grade had 1 teacher. Incidentally, my teacher that I remember there was Eleanor Baker, later Eleanor Reeves. She married Jess Reeves, who was a prominent businessman in West Jefferson. Owned Reeves Feed and Seed, I think it was.
What was your favorite subject?
Recess.
What was your least favorite? I thought you were going to say girls, but what is your least favorite subject?
Music. Music, I think, was my least favorite subject.
What about church? Where did you guys go to church?
Well, it was 7 miles to the church that we belonged. I believe about 7 miles to the Missionary Baptist Church in Nathan's Creek. So it was, we went, Bible reading on Sunday was, at home was the usual church.
How often would you go to center?
Once or twice a year. My granddad had a pickup truck, a 1936 Dodge pickup, and nobody in our family could drive, but Uncle Art could drive, so he took us everywhere.
What year did you get electricity on the farm?
Never while I was there. I think I left in 1943, and I don't think they got electricity until maybe 50 or 51. We had what was called coal oil, kerosene lamps. We called it coal oil.
What was a typical meal growing up? Was your grandmother a good cook, and what did she typically fix?
My grandmother was an excellent cook. She would be up at 5 o'clock in the morning cooking breakfast on a wood stove, and we would have fried fatback, biscuits and gravy, coffee, which by today's standards would be undrinkable, but it was that would be breakfast. For lunch, we called it dinner. We would have maybe beans, cabbage, cornbread, always cornbread, always biscuits for breakfast, cornbread for lunch and supper. And but to go back, we would have maybe green beans or what we call soup beans, pintos. Supper would usually be leftovers from dinner. And we had milk, of course. We had milk cows, and we had plenty of milk to drink.
What was your favorite dessert that your grandmother made?
I think canned fruit would be about the only dessert we had. We might have a cake maybe once or twice a year. I never heard of baking a cake for a birthday that I recalled until I was grown. But my favorite cake was a vanilla cake with boiled icing. It's phenomenal. My wife today still makes it at my request.
I understand. So you have a twin brother.
Yes.
And Bob and his wife essentially adopted you, took you to their house. Where did your brother go?
My twin brother went with my mother's parents, Shadrach, better known as Shade Baker, and his wife Susan, my grandparents on my mother's side. They lived near Crumpler.
So both of you ended up going from Pennsylvania to Ashe County.
Right.
Did you see each other growing up?
Never. I never spoke to my twin brother.
Why?
We lived 4 miles apart and never had occasion to run into each other. Or our grandparents never saw occasion to get us together for some reason. I don't understand it, but I don't know. It wasn't, I don't believe it was due to any animosity. I think it was just the times.
So when did you connect with your brother again?
The first time I saw my twin brother, I believe, was in about 1971 at a family reunion when we were 41, 42 years old.
What was that moment like? That had to have been almost surreal.
It was. To tell you the truth, I don't remember a lot about it. For some reason, but I liked him. He was a very nice person. I tell people he was a much nicer guy than I am.
Now, growing up, did you ever go into West Jefferson?
Yes, we'd go to West Jefferson maybe once a month or whenever it was necessary to to buy staples.
Can you describe West Jefferson to me? Can you tell me what the town was like in the 1930s?
There's two places I can recall very good was Smithy's store and Jess Reeves Feed and Seed, and across the street from that was Charlie's Diner. It was an old streetcar, I believe, and he sold. That was the original fast food in Ashe County. He sold hamburgers, hamburger meat mixed with, I believe, bread. And that's the first time I had a hamburger. That was my father, on one of his rare visits, took me there.
Did you ever go to the movie theater in West Jefferson growing up as a teenager or anything?
I did quite often, actually. I'd say quite often, probably once a month maybe, or once every 2 months. My cousins and I, Frank and Sam, would go there for a Western movie. Tom Mix, Sunset Carson, that was my favorite, of course. And I believe the price was 11 cents. And when I lived with my grandparents, we didn't have electricity, and we didn't have a telephone, and of course we didn't have a radio. We had two outhouses. One was the old original, and sometime during the mid to late 30s, the government ruled that you had to have one that met certain specifications. So they came through and built outhouses, and we had a new, modern, updated two-holer.
And what about modern toilet paper? Wasn't existent back then, so was it Sears Roebuck catalog, corn cobs?
Both Sears and Montgomery Ward. We weren't choosy, and corn cobs were occasionally in use.
Do you miss those days?
No, not that part of it. I do not miss that part of it.
Indoor plumbing has its advantages, doesn't it?
Yes. Those were not that was not some of the good old days.
Why is it important to know this stuff?
If you don't know the history, you don't know who you are. And looking at it in one way, I feel a lot better off knowing what I've learned in the last year or so about the history.
What would you say to Carson family members 100 years from now that very likely could be watching this video 100 years from now, and they're hearing about some of the life experiences that you've shared that are so opposite of anything we even know today versus 100 years from now? What would you say to them about the Carson heritage, Carson history?
That's a tough question, but I think I would encourage them to look at this history, look at the history, and hopefully be proud of what their ancestors did, as we are of our ancestors.